Greetings, this is Doc Ock coming at you live and direct from Black Facts Headquarters Central this evening with another installment of Doc Ock at noon and 9. And as you can tell, I'm feeling real fine, like old wine in a new bottle, ready to flow, ready to go on with the show, because the show must go on. But before we go on, you know, we need you to do something we've been asking you to do for quite some time now, and you still haven't done it, and that is to subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel. If you would, just take a minute to hit that red button over there on the side and subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel. We would really appreciate it. And in the meantime, we'll even do you a flavor that you can savor right now, because it'll keep you from having to quaver or waver at all at any time. We're going to read you our words of the night, or words of the day, if you will. From the island of Jamaica, we have these words of wisdom. Coward mind keeps sound bone. Coward mind keeps sound bone. In other words, better to be a live coward than a dead hero. Better to be a live coward than a dead hero. Now, everybody might not necessarily agree with that statement, but take a minute and think about it. Which one would you rather be? And then we'll come back to that later, and we shall see what you chose to be. Meanwhile, we're going to move right along into our slideshow for the evening and our story of the evening, which is the Feather Woman of the Jungle. More tales of the Feather Woman of the Jungle. Just when you thought we were all done with the jungle, we're going to bungle right on off into this jungle with the story of the treacherous queen and the king in the bush of quietness. And this is from the entertainment of the third night, because we've already read the entertainment of the first and the second night. So now we're into the entertainment of the third night. And let's just see what our friend Amos Tutuola has in store for us on this night. The beginning of my second journey. It was that bewitching hour, hardly 9 o'clock of the third night, when the people of my village came to my house to enjoy the entertainment of my second adventure. All sat as usual, and everyone was served with one keg of palm wine. But on this third night, they brought with them some drums, some horns, and many other of the native musical instruments, because we were badly disappointed about the musical instruments from that first night. Then I sat on my usual old armchair in front of them as the moon was shining. As the moon was shining. And the cool breeze of that dry season was blowing very quietly. Then after everyone had drunken of his or her palm wine, and I put fire in my smoking pipe, I first addressed the people. You see, my people, my motto this night is that this world is not equal. That is my motto. So all my adventures were not the same. Don't think me to be a lame like that, because I'm not that kind of cat. So all my adventures were not the same. One who has head has no money to buy hat, and one who has money to buy hat has no head on which to put it. But my people, please put it in your minds as from this night, that under this sun there is nobody who is above temptation. temptation. So this night, I'm going to tell you about a treacherous queen, a very treacherous queen, who was not pleased with all the money that her husband, the king, had been given to her. Please listen well. Please listen well. Then, with one voice, my people shouted that they are listening to me. They are listening to me. So after they drank some palm wine and then sang and danced for a while, I started to relate the story of my second adventure as follows. After a few months that I had returned from my first journey, in which I had been changed into an image for the period of 2 years, I thought over one midnight that although I had met much difficulties, etc., in my first journey, but yet I had not experienced it as much as of those old people. Because if an old man tells all his difficulties, hardships, losses, etc., which he had met before he becomes old, many young men would prefer to die while young just to avoid these things. And I know exactly what he's talking about. That's real talk. Therefore, if I give up my adventures this time, it would be shameful to me. So for that reason, in the following morning, I invited almost all the people of the village to my father's house. After the drinks were served, then I announced loudly that I would start my second journey the following morning. So all the old men among the people praised me greatly for my bravery, and after that, the whole gathering wished me good luck before they went back to their houses. After many songs were sung and drums were beaten, in the following morning, I took one gun, hunting bag, machete, and some yams, and then I bade my father and mother goodbye before I left the village. But my junior brother Alabi did not follow me this time. I told him to stay at home, to be taking care of them. I traveled more than 2 weeks before I reached a town. That town was not so big, but also the inhabitants were rich. So this made me to stop my journey there. When I was escorted to the king, I explained to him that I was finding wealth about. But he laughed at me first before he said that I would get what I wanted from him, provided I could help him to find out his lost prince for him. But I asked with wonder whether his prince had been kidnapped, disappeared, or lost. He explained to me that he could not say what had happened to him because one morning when he went to the town in which his prince lived, there was nothing found. There were no houses, and people as before, all had been disappeared. But there was a fearful quiet bush instead. That king explained to me further that since that time he had heard nothing about his prince or the people of that town. Having told me the story of his prince, the food and drink were brought, and I dined and drank together with him. In the following morning, I took my gun, hunting bag, and my machete, and then I told the king to take me to the spot of the disappeared town. Without a word, he followed me, and we traveled more than 10 miles before we reached the spot of the disappeared town. At about 1 o'clock p.m., when he showed the spot to me, he returned to his town at the same time. And then it remained I alone in that quiet bush. Having traveled far away in it, I stopped. I made the fire near a tree. I roasted some yams and ate them. After that, I stood up and continued to roam about, just to find out what had happened to the prince, etc. But after a while, I stopped near a big tree just to listen to the cries of the doves, because you know those doves cry. because I'd liked to know the time or the hour of the day. But of course, there was no any voice of a bird or any living creature was heard. In that quiet bush, there was no single living creature. Even there were no ants or flies. And again, to my fear, all of the trees were stood still as if there was no breeze or air. Everything was very quiet in a terrible way, so that I was always shocked with fear every moment. Anyhow, I was still traveling deeply into this bush of quietness until when the darkness disallowed me to see. Then, when I could not see, I stopped. I lay down as I was thinking about the disappearance of the prince and his wife, etc. It was not so long when I fell asleep, when I began to dream. And it was not so long when I was dreaming when I saw that I was in a big town. I saw many people and the prince, that they were in a great severe punishment. Some could not walk, while some were walking about in that disappeared town, but with much difficulties. Having seen him in my dream like that, I was so feared that I attempted to go away from that bush so that I might not be one of them. But as I attempted to go away, one of the people held my arm, and then he was dragging me back, back, back. As I was trying to take my arm back from him, and I was unable to do so, I shouted with fear, "Leave my arm and let me go away from this town, because something just ain't right." But as I shouted with fear, I woke, and that time was about 12 o'clock in the midnight. Then I stood up and rubbed my eyes with my palm, but hardly walked to a short distance from that spot when I began to hear that a person was bitterly groaning from a long distance. Groaning, groaning, groaning like that about in the darkness. And I did not go far when I was seeing a big house in front of me. When I went nearer to it, I saw that a dim ray of light penetrated to the outside through one of the windows. Then I went to that window with fear. I peeped in, but I could not see anything in that house except the bitter groan of a person, which was being heard, not seen. Again, I held my gun at the ready on my shoulder while I held the machete ready with the right hand. Then I walked cautiously to the main gate of the house, which had no door, and I peeped in as I dangled my right foot on that entrance. But yet I did not see anything in there except the flame of a native mud lamp, which I saw far away in one of the rooms at the extreme left. That lamp was dimly burning with the palm oil. As I still dangled my right foot on the door, I noticed that the main gate had a portico which resembled that of an ancient palace of the olden days king. Several images like that of the lions, tigers, deers, antelopes, monkeys, crocodiles, lizards, men, women, etc. were carved on that portico from bottom to top, but some parts of them had been washed away by the rains, and all together with the portico were very old. In the veranda, there were several sprouts of small trees. The frames, roof, ceiling, etc. were nearly eaten off by the white ants. Chairs, stools, benches, mats, and tables were so old that they had fallen and scattered all over the veranda. Several insect molds were seen everywhere. Again, I noticed that, I think that's insect mounds. It should be mounds and not molds. We're seen everywhere. Again, I noticed that this house had a very big and square premises, which resembled that of the premises of the ancient palace. There were many shrines of the god of smallpox, the god of thunder, the god of iron, the god of the river, etc., which had been worshipped from a long time back. So all these things showed me that the house was a palace of a powerful king before. But what had happened to the king who had been living in there, I could not say yet. But as the groan of a person was still being heard, even more terribly than it had been before, from the extreme right of the house, so I entered, and I was walking very cautiously along on the veranda to the extreme right. It was so. I was walking along with great fear until I came to a large room. Then I stopped and peeped in, and to my surprise and fear, I saw one man laying on the floor. One big mud lamp was burning with the palm oil in a little distant from him. One old chair, which had been damaged by the insects, was in the right corner of that room. One of his four legs had been broken off, and this made it lean against the corner. But to my surprise, that man did not see me when I entered the room. I stood before him, and I was listening to his groan, of course, with fear. I noticed that he had been a very beautiful man before, very handsome man. He was about 45 years old. His beard and mustache had overgrown and were touching his breast. So these showed me that he had lay there for quite some time. His body was full of sores which were caused by whip, and pieces and splits of whip were lying all over that room. As he was groaning loudly and continuously, as if he was put in a fire, and as his pains were so much that he could not see me, so I walked cautiously nearer to him. I leaned my gun on my waist, I hung my machete back to my shoulder, and then I clapped hands very quietly. At first he was startled with fear, as if I were the person who was giving him the pains. Then he lifted up his head very slightly, as it was tied to the floor, and then he hesitated to hear what I came to tell him. But as fear and wonder did not allow me to say one word that moment, so he rested his head back on the usual place and continued to groan as loudly as before. My hope was that he would sit up or stand up if he heard my claps, but he could not do neither of these things. Having listened again for a while with a quiet voice, I asked, "Hello, how? But what is happening to you, which is so painful that you are growing repeatedly as if you are in a fire?" Then he tried all his best and lifted up his head a bit. He breathed out heavily with grief and with a harsh and sorrowful voice, and he replied, "Yes, you are quite right to ask such a question from me. But if you know my grievances, you would not be surprised to hear my groan." But when I heard his voice, which showed me that he would be willing to explain his grievances to me, and that he was willing to, I walked to the corner. I leaned my gun. After that, I dragged that old chair, which had three legs, before him. But as I was sitting on it, I fell down, and the chair itself fell apart because I'd forgotten that its fourth leg had been broken off. Therefore, I stood up. I supported it with that leg, and then I could sit on well. Again, I asked quietly, "Please tell me all of your grievances. Probably I may be able to help you." And then, after he had breathed out heavily with grief and hesitated for a while, he started to relate his story to me. I was the king of this palace, the house in which I met him. And my father is a powerful and kind king in his town, which is about 10 miles away from here. During the time that I was king of this town, the quiet bush in which that house was, I married one wife. She's very beautiful, and in respect of this, I loved her so wholeheartedly that I told her every one of my secrets, every secret, not knowing she's a powerful, treacherous woman who has also supernatural power. Sookie now. And now we're getting to the heart of the matter. A woman with supernatural power. Hard to say what will happen next. We're about halfway through that story, and we'll return to that tomorrow night. In the meanwhile, it's time for us to move on and groove on, and the same for you. All you little children out there know what time it is. Don't make me have to give you no quiz. You know just what you need to do because I know you're a serious whiz. So just take your little head and lay it on your little pillow on your little bed while you close those your eyes and wait on that sun to rise. And when those sunbeams start beaming down on your eyes, you'll know that it's time for you to rise and shine, old chillin' of mine. And as for you adults out there, you know what we need you to do. We need you to go ahead and subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel. If you haven't already, it's time to rock it steady. Go ahead and do it now. You might as well anyhow. Meanwhile, we'll be black tomorrow, not with our regular stories. We'll be black tomorrow with our weekend playlist, the first of two playlists. We do one each Saturday and Sunday where we do a rewind on all the presentations we did this week, and then we throw in some added bonuses of music and other related storytelling from other people. So you can hear how we tell our stories, and you can also compare and contrast with how other people tell some of the same stories and some different stories. They're all going to be in the same vein of a black homecoming. So look for the Black Homecoming playlist tomorrow. Until then, may peace guide your way and may justice clear the road while it lightens your load. Peace out without a doubt, y'all. We'll be black tomorrow night. And let's give a wave and a shout out to Larry Parker. Peace out, brother Larry. Anybody out there, you can always send us a little message or just drop us a line while we're here because we see you, we hear you, and we feel the vibes. Positive vibes. Thanks very much. We need those.